Processes and tools dominate today's Agile discussions, but we are devoted to the individuals and interactions that make it work. From the beginner to the veteran practitioner, we have something for you. Welcome to Agile for Humans.
Perhaps we should say who's on the chat today.
We've tried it a couple times. It's failed. I don't know. We don't want to reveal ourselves.
That's only because Ryan couldn't find the start button.
Oh, yeah, but you outed me, so I guess
You might as well introduce yourself now.
Yep, I'm Ryan Ripley.
I'm Mark Kilby.
I'm Aaron Kopel, coming to you live from Washington, D.C.
And I'm rounding out tonight's foursome. I am Don Gray from Maggie Valley, North Carolina. How many of you know Jason Tanner? I was part of a group at Capital One doing coaching years ago. And I'm going to go with elder statesman. Aaron, you were there.
I was there.
You were there. And what did they call me? Not the nice one, not the other one. So they called me Silver Alert.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Wow.
And Jason still brings that out from time to time. It's like, oh.
I actually put that on Urban Dictionary for you, Don. It's when an old person's story gets lost.
What were we talking about? Help me out here, Aaron.
Exactly.
Silver alert.
Oh, friendly, agile, or agile among friends, and silver alerts.
So what do you guys want to call it? We were talking about names. Agile among friends, agile with friends, friendly agile. Or should we go dark?
I think we should try to name it after the first few calls when we figure out what our theme is.
Ooh. So like lean startup this thing.
Yeah. Once we hit our stride, then we'll know exactly what to call it. It'll just be obvious.
Well, and the difficulty is when you name something, it becomes static.
That's true.
And
all right, so forget the name. Let's just get a topic.
I think we should have our first topic should be, what do we name this thing?
No. Well, let's dig into what we want this pod to be. Is this a bunch of people get on once a week and kind of joke around and talk about Agile? Do we want to be informative? Do we want to be coaching? Do we want to be caring? What do you guys think this ought to be? What does the Agile world need from a podcast?
Yes.
All right, good. That's decided. No, if you look through iTunes, right, so there's some really good pods out there. So This Agile Life does a nice job of getting the same core hosts together. They have their developer angle, and they really hit on some really good topics. They do a nice job. Bob Galen does the Metacast, and that's more of him, and I believe the other gentleman's name is Josh. They do a really great job of hitting on topics within their domain. But there isn't just a rotating group of people hitting on different topics and different angles on a regular basis.
I don't know if it was Aaron. I think it was Aaron that asked the question. What do folks need? What is it we think our audience might be? What's the persona? Yeah.
So what are the needs, wants, goals, and limitations of our listeners?
Yeah.
So what do you guys think? Do we go on with the naming ideas, or do we just jump into a topic and see where this goes? And maybe by the end, we have a tagline and a name.
Yeah. Let's just go for it.
Yeah. So we can sort of run it more as open space. Whoever showed up, who was before of us, are the right people. Now we have to come up with the right topic.
So there's a few out on our board that got thrown out there. I don't know. I know Aaron and I were both at Agile Indy, and I really liked Hala Saleh's "My Agile is Better Than Your Agile" talk, and I think that's a really amazing topic that people need to hear more about. I'll tee that up for you guys a little bit. She had written a blog post in frustration over how traditional project managers, management, and all these other trigger words in the Agile world, how those people are treated in an Agile transformation. There was a job posting of an Agile project manager, and someone put a comment on it saying, "I'd never hire an Agile project manager. If you think that's a job, you don't understand Agile, and you should quit and get out of our industry." And in response to that, she wrote this really beautiful blog post, which we'll put a link to in the show notes, just saying, look, we all learn Agile incrementally. We need to be kind. We need to be patient, and drop the judgment. And I thought it was just a great piece, considering all of these Twitter wars that go on over no estimates or mob programming or all these battles that flare up over these new ideas. I just thought it was a very timely and really interesting talk. I'm just curious what your guys' thoughts are, on the Agile community, the need to show a little restraint and kindness, and maybe you guys have seen something like that.
Yeah, I unfortunately missed the talk, but I heard a lot of good things about it throughout the day. And, I think it's a good observation that there's a need for empathy for those that just, at this point are still uninitiated into the full fold of Agile and that way of thinking. And, there's some need to help them along. And so maybe they're laggards on the change curve, but they're still people.
Well, so this is Mark, and I'll add to that. There's even, battles within our Agile community. I mean, in the early 2000s, it was, Scrum versus XP versus, the few others that I don't know if those other methodologies or frameworks are even around anymore. But, in the, I guess, 2011, 2012 timeframe, now we get the scaled Agile frameworks kind of battling out. And in my view, they've all got a place. They've all got a sweet spot where they work, and somewhere they may not work so well. And I always find it valuable to know a little bit about all of them, just because you never know which combination of tools you might need for a particular transformation.
At the core of it, though, do you guys think that empathy is perhaps the missing Agile or Scrum value? That somehow we've left off this important human quality, even though we say we value individuals and interactions over processes and tools, but somehow we left the empathy part out of the equation?
You mean we're not supposed to manipulate?
Or coerce or abuse?
Oh, snap. Okay, all right.
Mark, you're doing it wrong.
Okay, man, all this time. No,
So,
go ahead, Don.
I'm sorry. So this is Don. Let me step back and suggest that what we value are people and interactions over processes and tools. That does not say that we do not need project management.
Yeah.
There is still a fiduciary responsibility to the organization and to those who have invested in that organization. What Agile does, and let me say specifically Agile processes, we have a different way of developing software. We use different metrics. That does not lessen the need or responsibility for managers to be accountable to legal and financial authority. So, I do agree that there are job advertisements that just drive me bonkers. And the Scrum Master will drive the team to success. That's torn me up for a handful of years.
Yeah.
But there are things I feel we should be doing to help project managers. We still have projects. We still get cash. We still have to account for how that cash was spent. And are we returning value? The numbers we use are different. And perhaps, Ryan, this is where the empathy comes in. We still have to do those things, but we've changed how we do it, and let's help those who are responsible understand the changes so that they can do their job better as we deliver value better.
But I think that's part of the point, though, and I think you bring up a good one with fiduciary responsibility. I think some of this reaction to that issue specifically with Agile project managers and trying to save the project managers, there's some fiduciary impact to trying to help people who are way on one side of the change curve in Agile thinking to try to get to the other end, rather than just saying, rather than trying to drag these people that have dug their heels in and don't want to hear it, it's easier and more financially responsible to not have to do that and go find someone who's willing, right? So I think that's part of the thinking, and then I think some of where that comes from is just past experience and trauma of trying to maybe they haven't done a good job of empathizing, but it's trying to offer paths to go agile, and maybe people are just reluctant or dug their heels in, and so financially it just makes more sense to not have to deal with that. So that's one option. And I think some of the other stuff you talked about, we still have to be financially responsible about projects and things like that. But that doesn't mean you need a project manager. That means you need an accountant, right, and a marketing person. And I think that's where some of that comes from as well. But so I don't want to necessarily turn this into a battle about whether project managers are a good idea or whether you need to empathize. But I think the broader point that she was making was more about just trigger words in general, right? So there's a lot of things where there's such strong reaction to a variety of things. I mean, the project manager is one that I think we can have more empathy for, and that's great. But then you think about things that Ryan mentioned about no estimates or things like that. Do we have to do TDD, or if you're not TDD, you can't possibly be doing Agile and things like that? Where if we think about it more of as a mindset, getting back to the values and principles, there's a lot of those kind of trigger words that just set people off in one direction, and really then they put up walls around it and won't hear anything else, right? So I think that's part of what she was talking about, broader than the project manager issues, really just those trigger words and shutting down our attention to people that don't quite think that way yet.
Yeah, and even taking it to that next level of not only am I going to shut down, but maybe I'm going to engage and judge and really just make a mess of the whole situation. And I've done that, right? So I've come back from conferences with, a purist mindset, and I hadn't quite calmed myself down, and someone rather new to Agile or to that kind of thinking would ask me a question, and I would just shut down any alternatives. And over time, you learn that people just withdraw, right? So when you had someone who was interested, but asking perhaps questions that you may not agree with, rather than saying, no, you can't possibly do that, like Aaron was saying, or like if you're not TDD, you're not Agile, using that more softer approach, bringing some empathy to the forefront, I think is a lot of what her point really was.
And I'm assuming that was Ryan?
Yeah, that was Ryan. Sorry.
Oh, and that was Don asking if that was Ryan. So back to Don. And that's that's why it's interesting that we're wondering what to name the podcast. And for those of you who can't see my computer system, the Trello board says Unnamed Podcast Project. The words we use trigger feelings in other people. And I was not part of Agile Indy, so I was not, I'm sorry, that was bad English. I have no reference into the original material, but she's very correct. The words we use create feelings. And one of my current focuses involves necessary but not sufficient. So if you look at the Agile Manifesto, you'll see the left hand, the right hand, and we value those things left on left more than right, but the right are necessary. So we need the processes and tools, but they are not sufficient. When we get into the people and interactions, and I think this is where our conversation is sort of headed at this moment, I could be mistaken, we have to understand that our words create feelings and emotions. And it's not about our way's better than their way. It's about we are people, and software is an inherently complex problem that must be solved. And to do that, we have to understand how we impact each other.
So, Don, when you're working with, let's say, a new person to Agile, or they're just a recently minted CSM, is your approach somewhat different than when you're talking to, say, Aaron or Mark or myself, and we're trying to hash through these ideas? Is the approach or angle different, or the words different? How do you make that statement actionable, I guess?
So, Mark has been to the I'm sorry, is it too early to put in a blatant plug for the Coaching Beyond the Team workshop?
I think you just did.
Oh, okay. There's a range of consulting roles a person can take. And what I try to do when I'm working with a newly minted CSM or a handful of them in an organization, they're working on trying to figure out their role, how they fit into the new paradigm, the new processes, and I tend to be highly careful of the words I choose. When I work with somebody like Mark, or you, or Aaron, I've actually been in the trenches with Aaron. We've actually worked with at a client site together. So I'm a little less careful because of an established rapport. For those of you who didn't hear the 3 tries that Mark didn't manage to push the start button correct, Ryan and Aaron and I were going back and forth about some of the conversations I had earlier. That would have been, like H in History, 2012. And because of our established rapport and connection, I've known Mark, 2008, 2009?
Somewhere around there, yeah.
Somewhere around there. And then I met Ryan this year, or actually last year, at the Agile Coach Camp in Indy. When you have a rapport, when you have a connection, you get a little bit more tolerance in the things you can say, and people will go, well, wait a minute, did you really mean? But overall, the words we use create feelings in other people. And you have to be careful with that.
Yeah, I think it's definitely important to ask questions and to watch the words, and it's something that working with and interacting with guys like the 3 of you and others, I've had to become much more conscious of the words I say, because there are some loaded trigger words and it can cause misunderstanding. So I think that is the important point of that topic. I don't know, have we hammered this one down and time to move on?
I'd like to just put in one more plug.
Sure.
I'm currently reading the book Humble Inquiry by Edgar Schein. Excellent book about status difference, about asking questions, about the culture of telling versus asking. Excellent book. Recommend it highly.
So, and actually that reminds me of something, Don, that it's something that I talked about this past weekend at Agile Indy indirectly, is that when you and I were talking about, and I'm going to say this wrong, cynefin, and you sent me some...
Cynefin.
Cynefin, thank you.
Cynefin.
Cynefin. I'd never heard it said before. That's great. You asked permission prior to sending me all of that information and made sure that I was even open to help, and that really had a huge impact on me. It was a great little lesson there, and I think I'd imagine it's related to that book that you just plugged, and I can't recommend that approach enough, because once he asked that question and I said yes, I think it's a next level of engagement, and it opened me up to learning, and I think it enabled Don to send some things and to interact with me through email in a more meaningful way. So just wanted to point that out and show a little appreciation for that too.
Well, thank you. And I think that actually came out of a book called Mindful Coaching by Doug Silsbee. And Silsbee is Silsbee. Mindful Coaching. Excellent book.
And we'll put links in the show notes to those 2 books and some of the other sites that we've talked about. So how about the rest of us? You guys have a topic that's front of mind or on your heart about Agile that you think would be a good second topic for us?
So one I was thinking about, and I put this on our Trello board, was I was kind of curious about the local Agile user groups. So I know with you guys up in Agile Indy, it's a very active group, and I was curious to hear more about it. I can tell you guys about what we're doing here in Florida because we've got several groups. But I think it's important that no matter where folks are, the best thing to do is connect with the local group, and it's funny how people are reluctant to do that. So if you guys want to chat about that, I'm good with that one, or we can go on to another topic.
Yeah, so this is Ryan. I think it's an interesting topic. It's one that I've actually been pinging Aaron about quite a bit. So I'm actually out of Fort Wayne, Indiana, and it's just far enough away from Indianapolis that it makes attending Agile Indy somewhat difficult, but I will try to get down to a few of them. I'm actually looking at trying to start up a local Agile group in Fort Wayne, maybe call it, I'll be original and call it Agile Fort Wayne. But no, they've set an excellent model down in Indianapolis. I've been reaching out to Aaron. Matt Block is someone else that I think had a pretty big part in the establishment of that group. And I'm actually looking to be in the founding stage of one of these groups pretty soon, Mark. But I don't know if Aaron would be willing to talk a little bit about Agile Indy. From my perspective, they put on an absolutely amazing conference this past weekend. In their third year, they're almost to 400 attendees. Mike Kottmeyer was the keynote, some really excellent stage presentations. From what I've heard, some really engaging breakout sessions. I was able to speak at the conference, really appreciated that opportunity. Just a fantastic event, in Indianapolis, Indiana, where you may not expect such a great Agile conference, but they've gone from, a new organization and within 3 years hitting a huge stride like that I think they are certainly a model to follow.
Yeah, so this is Aaron. I'll just add a little bit to that. So we've had the conference for 3 years, and I think we had the user group for maybe a little bit more than 2 years before that. And the interesting part is we had some people that were pretty passionate about it that got it started, got it off the ground. Started actually doing monthly meetups, and those grew from 15 people up to, I think we've had several that were north of 80 people a couple times for specific topics or specific speakers that came in town. Probably averages somewhere in the neighborhood of 40 or 50 people a month. But the interesting part is it really seems like just from, maybe it's just this particular community, but there's not a whole lot of companies announcing out loud that they're going Agile or really thinking about Agile. And so there's a lot of people that show up to the meetings that I think are a bit less confident. They're not quite sure about it. They're really in the early stages of their learning curve and Agile journey and that kind of stuff. So there's a lot of trying to seek out knowledge and not quite to the point where a lot of people are sharing knowledge. And so the interesting part of that has been, as we ask for people to, step up and volunteer and do different things to just help support the group, people are a bit tentative about that. So we sort of have the same core group of 6 or 10 people that are always on the hook to do some of that stuff. So one thing we're consciously doing is coming out of this conference last week is really thinking about how do we get more engagement from the community, where it's not just that one small core group that's sort of driving everything. We want it to be really much more of a core or community and organization. So we're trying to find ways to do more of that. I've had a chance as I've been traveling around for consulting to go to a few other local user groups, and it does seem to be a bit more of community engagement, but there's always some core group that's helping to just at least initiate things, but there's a lot of people that step up to help too. So, but I think, to Ryan's point, the third year here, it was really a great conference and a great venue at the NCA headquarters. So it was a little bit different than your standard convention center and that kind of stuff too. So just gave it a very interesting feel and a lot of good speakers, and nearly 400 people in the third year for Indianapolis is a pretty amazing achievement.
Well, congrats on that.
So this is Don. Aaron, I have a question. As you travel around and attend the various meetups, do you find that the meetups have different personalities, that the different groups of people tend to come to one or the other?
Yeah, definitely. So for example, in Indy, there's really just one Agile meetup. But as I've gone to other places, so places that are much more Agile hubs, like in the Dallas area in Texas, you go to the Bay Area, places like that where there's just a lot more activity going on. There's the groups tend to be not just nebulous Agile, but they might be more segmented into specifically into XP or product management or quality, different things like that. And so you get a bit more of a specific feel, which then you get definitely a bit different personality, because there's a lot more passion around a specific topic rather than just the universe of Agile, the big umbrella of Agile. You get a lot more passion at those more specific points, I guess. So that's one thing I've seen that's kind of exciting. If you really do have one of those passion areas and you go to that particular meetup, you're going to get a lot more excitement and I guess feeding your brain for that specific need.
Thank you.
So, Aaron, this is Mark. How many did you say you had in Agile Indy right now?
So the conference we held last Friday, we had just under 400 attendees, I think, altogether. And the actual meetup group, I honestly can't remember. It was, I want to say it's somewhere around 500 if we deal with our meetup group and how many people are signed up on there.
Okay.
And average monthly attendance is probably around 50 for the monthly meetup.
Okay, that's pretty good. Yeah, so it's interesting to hear what you guys are doing, because compared to what we have here in Florida, so I started the Agile Orlando group a few years back, restarted about 3 years ago, so about the time I guess you guys were starting up in Indy. And roughly the same time, Tampa Bay Agile was restarting, and South Florida Agile was getting going. And kind of like you, Aaron, I was traveling around as a consultant then, so I traveled those locations, got to meet those meetup organizers. And so from that, we kind of formed a little bit of a network between us. And that's kind of helped us come up with ideas and support and marketing as well, especially social media, to help kind of promote each other's events. And I was wondering, do you have other groups in your area that you reach out to, either Agile or otherwise, that you kind of network with? Yeah,
actually, I can't remember who specifically had set it up, but there's a group called, the initials are IAPS, so it was something like Indiana Association of, I don't know, I can't remember what the PS is, but anyway, it's a group of meetup groups, essentially. So there's maybe 6 or 7, which include, there's a UX group, there's the PMI chapter, a couple more for other things in operations management and stuff like that. So there's maybe 5 or 6 different groups. And the intent was to get together for a couple different things. So trying to find speakers for one, and the thought of potentially doing a sort of shared conference or something at some point in the future. And there's also specifically in December, there's a local TV personality who does just sort of the state of the Indiana business climate and things like that. His name is Gary Dick. And so he would do a December talk for the PMI chapter, and part of the thought was to just share that opportunity with the rest of these groups as well. So starting to share speakers, speaker lists and invitations. So if we did have someone, say, come to town who was consulting with a company and they might be a good speaker for Agile Indy and we didn't know about them, then there's an opportunity to share that through that group more broadly. Yeah, so I'd say they're not exactly all closely related, but they're other sort of community interest kind of groups like that we've taken advantage of. I'm not sure I'm aware of that in a lot of other places. I just know that one because I've been involved with Agile Indy as a board member.
Well, because I think about Ryan as somebody trying to start up a new group. I remember what that's like, having done it a few times now. And when you're solo doing that, it's tough. So it's looking in who else is around, who can I network with, who can I do the co-promotions with, and that's, for what I recall, was key to really getting us going. We're about 400 in Agile Orlando. I think South Florida is like 600 or 700 now, and Tampa's 500, and South Florida's putting on their own conferences. We just did we're about to do our second open space in Florida. We did the first one last year in June, and about to do the second one.
Mark, sorry.
Yeah.
This is Don.
Yes.
Please be specific. You're doing the Agile Open Florida? Is that to what you're referring?
I am.
Thank you. And where can they find information?
We'll have that in the show notes on where they can go to agileopenflorida.com. So I wasn't trying to do a plug there, but thanks, Don. Really, because I've helped a lot of other folks get their user groups off the ground, and for me, networking is very important, and I think helps the individual as well as the community. So I'm always looking for what are other people doing, and how is it working for them? Where are they stumbling? And is there sort of a support network for these leaders who are out there trying to start these groups because they have a passion for Agile or really any topic. So always looking for those ideas. So
Yeah, I appreciate that. Right now I've been able to put together a core group, and maybe I'm going down the anti-pattern path that Aaron was given his cautionary tales about, but tried to find, and I think I've done that, core group of 10 people that are passionate about the topic, about getting a group going, and then trying to network and build off of that. And then, of course, the Agile Indy guys, Aaron and Matt and a few others have been really helpful. Mark, you've provided some advice, and I think between all of that, we're going to be able to get it off the ground, and the question will just be, can the city support an Agile meetup type group? And I think it can. There are a number of companies that are either looking at Agile or are in the middle of a transformation. I think it should be interesting, and hopefully, the goal would be to get the group built up, get a decent membership, help feed into the larger, Agile Indy conference, maybe do a few open spaces of our own, but really get Indiana, on the map from a state perspective in the Agile community, and see just how much interest there is in our state.
Yeah, and I wouldn't say, building up a core group of people, I wouldn't call that an anti-pattern. I think it's a good first iteration for a Agile user group. I mean, I've seen that many times. But the thing is, after about 2 or 3 years, people get a little tired, and not everyone has the same passion for it. So that's when you need to start looking for what's the next thing to keep the group moving forward. And I think it sounds like that's where Aaron's group is at.
Yeah. I think you're exactly right, Mark. And so I would say that you definitely have to have that core group that has passion to just get it off the ground, right? But just like any startup company, the startup CEO may not be the one who takes it to IPO. And so
Right.
that's kind of the stage I think we're nearing is, we've got to stop thinking quite so tactically about how do we get the next speaker for the monthly meeting and talk about, holistically what strategically can we do to start advancing Agile in other areas. So we started off with, how do we attract some, Scrum Masters and team members to come out and just start talking about it. And now we've got enough people interested, we could actually start making some real impact with the community and things like that at large, but we have to start thinking that way. And so that might require, going beyond that initial core group, getting more community involvement, that kind of stuff. That's sort of where I was going with that, Ryan.
Yeah, all great tips. So I really appreciate it. And now I'll keep the listeners up to date on how that's progressing, and hopefully within the next month or so, Agile Fort Wayne is up and running. You have a first few meetings, and we'll see where it goes from there. So I think we've hit that topic pretty well. Looks like we've got time for perhaps one more topic to dig into. Anything else going on with you guys that you'd like us to claw back and take a look at, or who's got our nice closeout topic?
So I was really curious about the one on Scrum Master as an impediment to the team.
Yeah, so this was the talk that I gave at Agile Indy.
I made a plug. Wow. Okay.
No, it was fine. And we'll put a link to the slides and all that in the show notes. But I did a talk called "Help: The Scrum Master is the Impediment," and it was really a talk about how well-meaning, benevolent Scrum Masters, how their behavior can lead the team down bad paths, and what Scrum Masters can do to inspect and adapt their own behaviors and things to look out for, so that they don't become an impediment to their team's success, and just tips and thoughts around that. I've given the talk twice now, once to a local business here in Fort Wayne, and then the second time at Agile Indy, and it's gotten I think it's hitting a strong note. I think there are frustrated teams and even frustrated Scrum Masters out there who may not be getting the results they want, who are not seeing the self-organization they were expecting, and trying to figure out where the blocks are. And the idea that the Scrum Master could be the cause of some of that trouble, I think, is resonating with quite a few people.
Yeah, I would say, Ryan, that ties back to what Don was saying on our first talk is, how you introduce yourself to a team and build rapport, that can really set, some of those patterns in place, and they could be good patterns or bad patterns if you're not careful.
Yeah, and a lot of the difficulties, I think, comes from transitioning from old roles to your new role. Right. So one of the slides that gets a laugh but is somewhat serious, I call it the PMP to CSM pipeline. When I first discussed this concept with some people, the first thing that popped in my head was the Shawshank Redemption and Andy Dufresne climbing through that sewage pipe and finally hitting that water and cleaning off. It was so funny to me that I went ahead and made a slide with that image of him climbing through the sewage. But it is a gut-wrenching experience, especially when, my background was developer to project manager to Scrum Master to management. And going from that traditional project manager to Scrum Master, you have these moments or these crises of conscience where you want to give a direction or you want to assign a task or you see something that you perceive as awful on the horizon and you have to pull back, ask more questions, give less or, state fewer statements. And it really is just an uncomfortable feeling for at least the first 6 months, at least in my experience, making that change. And that was a big part of the talk too. It is difficult taking these skills and practices that once made me so successful in my role and, led to career progression, and basically deciding that those are not the right way to interact with people and that I had to change. And I think that kind of message, it is resonating, and it's one that, it's a fun talk to give, and I think it's an important topic that doesn't necessarily get a lot of attention.
Yeah, I'd agree.
I'm just adding a card to the Trello board that says things we've had to change or things we have changed.
Ooh, good one.
So, Ryan, I think the last part of what you're talking about also is something that I've dealt with a lot with leadership as we think about overall organizational change. And what, a lot of this ends up adding up to once you get beyond the team level, getting into management, is helping them understand what needs to change from their mindset. And it's exactly what you described, right? What's made them so successful, the way that they've climbed the corporate ladder and gotten to the position where they are the behaviors that we're trying to stop and really get them to think a different way. And it just becomes a challenging thing because they feel that's what success, that's what's equated to success for them is those behaviors that we're trying to change. So it's a really interesting dynamic when you get into that level.
Yeah, and it's a level that I'm getting to play in now. And what I'm finding is, and Aaron, maybe I think your experiences are, from what we've talked about, are probably similar. There is this huge illusion of control in current, I guess, in traditional management theory, where everything can be solved with a process. And if you do enough daily meetings and do enough check-ins, you can control something to a positive outcome. And clawing that back, especially in large companies, is just painful. And what I finally have decided is that people in that mindset are just so terrified of trusting software development teams that I think part of our role as Agile coaches and Scrum Masters is I think it's part therapist. Just working with teams and management and leaders, trying to get that trust back between the different disciplines and trying to get them to a place to where you don't have to have all of these control mechanisms and processes to deliver a quality outcome. I don't know, Aaron, would you agree have you seen that kind of mentality play out, or have I missed it?
No, I think that's spot on. I mean, it's been a long time what they've been trying to put those processes in place to control things, and it's hard to let go, right? Otherwise, part of it feels like, oh my God, I just wasted many years trying to put those things in place, all for naught. So it's sometimes it's a hard thing to face. But hopefully you get, forward-thinking managers that can think about those things as a sunk cost and try to move forward and start taking advantage of concepts like self-organization, where you can unleash the power of all those smart people that you've hired and are trying to control and keep in a box. And if you can unleash them, then good things can happen. If you can get comfortable with that, then I think you're probably on the top end of the spectrum in terms of management thinking, which sort of gets into some of the stuff I've been reading about lately. With, I think it's the Leadership Agility book. I think Bill Joyner was one of the authors, and really talking about catalytic leadership, those kind of things, getting beyond the heroic stage of leadership where you have to, like the traditional project manager, where you have to be out in front and lead everything and try to control everything. And if you can get beyond that heroic nature, what he calls post-heroic, into more catalytic leadership where you're energizing the people in the organization to unleash their full potential, then you're in a much better spot. I think this is the part, Don, where you do a one-liner.
Wow, wasn't this good?
Aaron, we need to play a silver alert drop, and that tells Don it's time to drop the one-liner.
So I agree with Aaron. There's a great book. Ta-da, ding! That was the rim shot for another plug. William Bridges wrote a great book called Managing Transitions. And in it, there's a chapter on the life cycle of an organization, a company. And what it talks about is what makes you successful at one stage of your existence in a company has to be left behind as you move to the next stage. And so when you get to certain companies that have been around for a long time, the things that have made the managers and the executives successful to get here are going to be changed as they move to the next phase. And he actually has like 7 different phases and does not reference Agile at all. It's more about change than Agile itself. Or the changes that we look at as we do Agile software development. So the people who get left behind are the ones who are most successful. And tying back to Ryan's concept of empathy, and Hala's, my Agile is better than your Agile, we have to find a way as coaches, consultants, as people who are hoping to make software development more fulfilling, exciting, and fun, for these people to understand that there's a place for them as we move forward.
But it does require some change.
If they're willing.
Yeah.
Well, it does. So change is a very funny thing. You know, you keep using that word. I'm not sure it means what you think it means.
Toya.
Thank you. And I believe we're going to exceed our time limit with that thought. So maybe what we should do is talk about change and some other things that have popped up on the topic list as we've been talking tonight. It does require change. We all change all the time. It's when... Okay, silver moment. Sorry. Change is, it's not really a silver moment. It's just such a fantastic and deep and broad topic that I can't wrap my hands around it in a short conversation. We do it all the time. We don't like it when it's pushed on us. And the one thing, I was reading another book called The Fractal Organization, and in it the author says, if people are resisting the change, the effort has already failed. People don't resist the initial change. It's, wait, if this thing is failing, and now I'm going to start pushing back. And there's another great book called Influencer, The New Science for Change or something other, that talks about how to help embrace change, but it's sort of beyond the conversational time we have left.
So why don't we take that
maybe for next time? Because there's a lot of meat to dig into there as well. I like that topic.
Yeah, I think the change topic is fascinating, and it's one that causes a lot of joy and success for those teams that are progressing well, but it's also a source of pain and struggle for those who aren't. And can't think of a better way for us to start up the next one. But for this particular edition of, what are we going to call this, guys? Maybe we'll call it the Agile Book Club with Don Gray.
I'm sorry. Did I do that?
Don, I love the book drops. I go out and buy every one of them, and I think there's a lot. You know what? The CSM classes are wonderful for teaching the mechanics of Scrum, but what they don't teach us is how to coach people, how to guide people, how to be that mentor that they need during these transformations. And I think these book recommendations are hugely important to expose people to that side of what their new job is. So I really appreciate them. But as far as this episode goes, I think that is our time box. And being agile and lean thinking people, it is time for us to call it a night. So, guys, I think we ought to go around the horn. Quick plug for anything you've got going on. Maybe tell people how they can get a hold of you through Twitter or any other social media that you like, and we'll call it a wrap. So, Aaron, how can people reach out to you if they want to know more about what is the Copel?
All right, so I guess you requested Twitter, so my Twitter handle is AACopel, which is AAKOPEL, or even better is email aaron@projectbrilliant.com. And thanks for having me.
All right, Mark.
Aaron's always so polite. Gosh, okay. So this is Mark Kilby, and you can reach me on Twitter at MKILBY, or email mark@markkilby.com.
Mr. Gray.
There's the silver hair again, isn't it? Oh, Lord. Twitter, Donald D. Gray. Email don@donalddgray.com. And the next thing I've got coming up, Mark has been part of the Coaching Beyond the Team workshop that Esther Derby and I do. Shameless plug. We're going to be in Sweden on May 11th and 12th. And then we'll be coming back to the United States for the next workshop somewhere, I don't know, in the Midwest. So, funny story, I'm from South Dakota, and we're Midwest. Indiana is not Midwest. Indiana is Mideast.
Okay. And I'm Ryan Ripley. You can find me on Twitter at Ryan Ripley, and I also blog at agileanswerman.com. On behalf of Aaron, Mark, and Don, I'd like to thank everyone for listening. We're going to inspect and adapt and do better next time.
Bye, y'all.
Thanks for listening to Agile for Humans. Let's keep the conversation going. Drop us a question on Twitter at Agile for Humans or visit agileforhumans.com.